Alright guys, welcome back to F1 News. The Dutch Grand Prix is finally here. Not the start of the weekend that Max Verstappen would have liked as he looks to defend his trophy here at his home Grand Prix, but it's actually Mercedes and McLaren bringing upgrade to their car this weekend that are topping the timesheet on day one of practice. What does this mean for the rest of the weekend? Because the order today was rather fascinating indeed, as was the long run data we'll dive into in the coming minutes. Very much enjoy your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. Firstly, update to the day, of course, coming out of Alpine. This has been rumoured now for some time, and it's finally true that Jack Doohan will be alongside Pierre Gasly for next season. It's a fascinating decision that they've decided to make. Probably, I would say Flavio Briatore has had some significant part to play in making this happen, and actually now makes him the third Australian on the grid, in addition to Daniel Ricciardo, who'll probably stay around next year, but who knows, as we talked about yesterday, one of, we believe, the Red Bull drivers is going to have to go, but as it stands, that looks more than not like it's going to be Sergio Perez, and of course Oscar Piastri as well, tying up the amount of drivers from the UK right now with Russell, Norris and Hamilton, but next year there's going to be Behrman as well. So the UK, I guess Britain will still maintain a lead in terms of number of drivers on the grid. But yeah, Doohan into Formula 1, son of Mick Doohan, superbike legend. To be honest, from my perspective, not the number one pick that I would have looked for, but I guess Doohan's cheap on some level and, loyal to the brand and has done a great job in, his kind of coverage of Formula 1 that he's done for F1 TV and stuff like this over the last few months or so. Exciting prospect, great to see more rookies on the grid, want to see how he's going to get on. This was a great picture of him at the Daniel Ricciardo Academy, basically, back in 2015, and, now he's actually on the grid. So a really cool story. How's it going to fare? I don't know. I don't have crazy high hopes for Doohan, as there is obviously heavy expectations for a guy like Andrea Kimi Antonelli. We'll discuss him in a second. So I think Pierre Gasly should have a relatively comfortable time against him, but we'll see what happens next season at Alpine. Always fun to get new talent on the grid, because we didn't get any of that last season for basically the first time ever. Maybe we're going to get more as well with Gabriele Bortoleto rumoured to be coming in. It's kind of crazy that Alonso's management team also manages Bortoleto. But Alonso is so old and so good still that he's potentially able to race against a driver that he has kind of in some sense represented and helped to get into the sport. So Bortoleto, if he does get a drive, it's going to be at Audi Sauber as it will be for next season, alongside Nico Hülkenberg. So that's the story there. Another big story of the day, though, was on Haas. Now, you guys might remember Uralkali, of course, the Russian oil company. But of course, they broke up that relationship at the start of 2022, and there is still apparently some sort of relationship there to yet be resolved, because Uralkali has apparently gone to the Dutch courts. Of course, it's the Dutch Grand Prix this weekend, and said, hey, we want to seize the assets of Haas, including cars and other equipment, over an outstanding payment that apparently they are owed as, for whatever resulting of their team. As a result, bailiffs and police have visited the Haas team at Zandvoort on Thursday night to push forward with the matter and evaluate the assets. So this is getting pretty serious. I imagine because Uralkali paid money to sponsor them, and maybe they paid more money than they actually got, in the sense that Uralkali paid some of that money for 2022, you might imagine, but then were stripped from their car and therefore didn't get any of the kind of results in return. Now, what the courts might potentially say on this, genuinely who knows, but apparently it's been agreed that Haas's participation is going to proceed as normal, but it's understood that the team has been told it will not be allowed to remove its cars and equipment from the country after the race until the outstanding payment is made. So this is a rather fascinating situation. Even, I think Ayo Komatsu said that, he's expecting no problems about this, but he's probably not going to say that he is expecting issues, right? So, yeah, what do you guys expect to happen next year? Are Haas going to be stuck in the Netherlands because until they make this payment? I don't know. Seems unlikely to me, but, just more drama here in the world of Formula 1. Couple of things on Sergio Perez. Not a great Friday for him again today, but, it's only practice, but that doesn't really fill me with that much confidence. And Perez talked about the performance, obviously problems that he's had. He says he's got his contract for the next couple of years. The meeting was nothing to do with the drivers, that apparently they had a meeting after Spa to determine Perez's future. And Perez says, oh no, it's nothing to do with me. It was just about the performance of the car. But I'm not sure I quite believe that. Now, Helmut Marko yesterday claimed, as we looked at, that someone, namely Liam Lawson, was definitely getting a seat at Red Bull, or Red Bull, basically the sister team in RB, next year. which obviously means someone's got to go. It's not going to be Max, it's not going to be Yuki, so it's going to be one of Perez or Ricciardo. That's what we talked about yesterday. And in classic Red Bull fashion, Horner has now come out to say, yeah, don't know what Marco's talking about, and basically contradicts that and says that we're not sure, nothing is fixed, we've got a few weeks to make those decisions. We know the situation with Checo, the contract that he has, there are options with Daniel and Liam. So this bickering internally at Red Bull has not stopped, and the same thing we've now seen for years at Red Bull when Marco says something that maybe you shouldn't have said, and Horner has to come out and say, well, no, we haven't technically made a decision yet. It's like the same stories and the same reasons and the same maybe symptoms of that civil war, the power struggle behind the scenes at Red Bull are still continuing to the present day. So, Marco's still going to say what he says and Horner's still going to deny it. They're going to be working for the same team, aren't they? So, I can't imagine Max Verstappen, or certainly Jos Verstappen, he doesn't really like Christian Horner, is going to be too happy with the way things are going there. One other little slip up here was from Toto Wolff, who apparently basically said that Kimi's going to be driving the Mercedes. This was the quote when he was asked the question on how what Russell's teammate's going to look like, and he says, the two next drivers in our car next year have our full support. I want it to work out with George and Kimi. And then probably realised, hang on, I shouldn't have said that. And, we're expecting Kimi Antonelli to get confirmed in Monza, where he's going to replace Lewis Hamilton in FP1, and probably they're going to do a nice announcement. And there's always going to be discussion on Antonelli. My feeling is that those that are not convinced that he's a prospect that Mercedes should consider probably haven't been watching him race for the last few years, because those that have watched Antonelli race have probably seen what Mercedes see in this guy. But obviously next year is a big risk for Mercedes, there's no doubt about that. Who's going to fight for the championship next year? Well, that's another debate, but this year it's really between Norris and Verstappen. It's really between Verstappen and Red Bull on some sense, because as long as Red Bull can keep up a car that is at least is solid, Verstappen is going to hold on to the championship win. But I would expect, on current evidence, Lando to close that gap, at least in terms of car performance. But Lando himself admits that he's not been driving at a world champion level and therefore doesn't deserve it this year. But he does now have a car that's even better. This weekend, McLaren have brought upgrades. Well, they think they're upgrades, and as of today, they look like upgrades. So I'm going to take their word for it that they've improved their car. It's been a while since McLaren have brought anything major. The last time, really, McLaren brought any major changes was back in Miami. And here they are again with 6 different upgrades on their car. Some circuit-specific, some overall performance for the vehicle itself. This is very interesting, right? Because they were competitive today, as you'd expect them to be. They've got more to come. And this is where Red Bull and Max is going to be like, hang on a second, boys. Newey's out the door. Where are my upgrades? Because McLaren are saying, yeah, we've been able to deliver another substantial upgrade that should improve the overall aerodynamic efficiency, so effectively improving straight line speed without compromising on downforce in the corners. We're definitely interested to see how the car responds with these novelties, and there'll be more coming in the other races. And that's one of the impressive things about today, is that McLaren were very competitive in their FP2 session, as were Mercedes, on a weekend where both teams bring upgrades. Now you might think, oh, obviously they're going to be good, they've brought upgrades, but it's not so simple as that. Often the upgrades, especially relatively major ones, take some time to bake in, and usually what you'll tend to see is that the team actually has more performance than you initially see. Next weekend, the weekend after, I'm expecting McLaren to be able to unlock more from these upgrades once they understand what setup pieces to tweak to get the most out of them. So the fact that they were so good today, I think, is actually pretty competitive, and it's the same story really with Mercedes as well. At the same time, where Red Bull are saying, yeah, we're not really sure where to go, and even today they've reverted some of their elements to an older specification, and Max is still in a fine position, but Perez obviously isn't having the greatest time. Now, FP1 was interesting, wasn't especially representative, right, because it was FP1 affected by rain, heavy winds, lots of intermediate tyre running. Eventually, Norris was the fastest lap with a 1:12.3, but that's not really representative of how fast these cars can go around this track, as we saw later on in the day. This was kind of interesting though, just comparing Verstappen and Norris and Hamilton in terms of where they had their track dominance throughout the session. But the interesting part really was what happened when we got into FP2. This is a more representative session, at least of the race on Sunday. Tomorrow we are expecting difficult conditions, heavy rain, wind, whatever. And the rain wasn't affecting drivers this session. The wind certainly was. The gust, the tailwind into turn 1 was affecting a few drivers off the track. One of them was Nico Hülkenberg, but that seemed to be like more of a rear locking problem with the car, because the way he turned in didn't seem like he should have locked up and spun off, but maybe a problem there with the Haas, I would imagine. But the wind was certainly causing problems for the drivers. But as the session went on, it became pretty clear who the fastest cars were. Obviously, Max was there. He put in a fastest lap time once they bolted on the soft tyres, roughly half a second, 6-7 tenths ahead of Alex Albon in the Williams. It shouldn't be a great track for the Williams, this, so that's an interesting kind of benchmark to look at. But Perez was 6 tenths behind himself. So this is the problem for Sergio Perez again, that he has to be within 3 tenths of Max. The issue is, even if Perez is within 3 to maybe 4 tenths of Max, a couple of races ago, let's say at the start of the season or even last year, that's fine. That's good enough for second place in race conditions, at least good enough for a podium. This year, even 3 tenths off Max isn't good enough to put you in the top 5, top 6, top 7, maybe not even the top 8 on some occasions. And if you're 6 tenths off, you're probably out in Q2. So that's the problem that Perez has to deal with for this weekend. And obviously this is only one particular lap in practice, but it's not exactly an unusual picture that we have seen this season. But Norris then went slightly faster, and then Piastri put on a great lap to go faster again, which was eventually pipped by Russell. Now, it's a little bit difficult to say exactly how much track conditions played into this, because as you guys can see, this Piastri lap was set roughly 3 minutes before the laps of Hamilton and Russell, and Verstappen's lap was set probably another 3 minutes before that. So if you want to say half a tenth a minute in terms of degradation, or let's say, improvement in track conditions, then everyone's lap time basically the same. But, it's interesting, right, that Norris's lap time was 2 tenths or so slower than Piastri a couple of minutes later. My feeling is that all of these guys could potentially be in the fight for pole position. The track evolution was pretty big around here, certainly because it usually is, but also mainly because it was raining earlier in the day, and therefore it was very much a green track going into this session. So Russell was P1, Piastri was P2, half a tenth back, Hamilton ended P3, a tenth back. So all incredibly competitive and great to see, right? I mean, the summer break has happened now, and here we go. I was, really excited to see the season get back underway, and here we have it, the top 5 at this point in practice, all within 3 tenths of a second, with 3 different cars in the mix. Like, very exciting to me. Now, if we look further down here, we'll find Carlos Sainz, who was in the pit with a gearbox issue, and we talked about Ferrari having effectively damage limitation this weekend. Their car does not really suit this track. They are struggling right now, and Leclerc puts in a lap that was green, but 7 tenths down on George Russell. So, serious losses, turn 8, turn 9. Just not a great time to be a Ferrari fan really at the moment. They've got upgrades to come, but it's been a real roller coaster for them. So this was the end of the session. Russell P1, Piastri P2. It was Alonso back in P6, ahead, of course, of Sergio Perez, who ended 12th actually in the end, who was basically 9 tenths back after we saw earlier. He was outplaced by Stroll, by Albon, by Leclerc, Magnussen, Tsunoda, and then Alonso with a good lap to put at P6 in the end. So, and then the other drivers as we go further down. There was also this moment of Charles Leclerc sending it down the inside of Sergio Perez. Of course, as we saw last year here, they've extended the DRS zone onto the banking now, so that definitely encourages some more overtaking into turn 1 that we've seen here in previous years. But I think a pretty fun track. Also, the gyro cam today was pretty fascinating to watch. We saw most of it really during the wet session, but certainly was seen in the dry as well. So let's look at some of the long run data then from this FP2 running, because this is usually the most telling. Now, it's always tough to say here because there is traffic getting in the way, there are other problems, but it's not like Max's lap times were crazy consistent. He was on a 16.5, 16.5, 16.3, 16.1, effectively 15.8, 15.7, 15.7, then an outlier lap, and then of course another outlier lap in the in lap basically. So got some traffic it seems. So solid lap times, as we'll see in a second, and on the soft he was faster for the runs that he did, but still a bit inconsistent, one of the outliers here and then, didn't seem entirely comfortable with the car, but that's not been entirely unusual as of late. These were the numbers then comparing the mediums between Verstappen and Norris. So he was both on medium tyres, and we can see Norris was averaging a 15.5, 15.5, 15.6, Verstappen averaging a 16.1. Now, you never know when you look at this data what the fuel load was, what the engine mode was, and this is what Christian Horner said after the session, but it wasn't that long ago that we were looking at these practice session numbers and Max would be half a second clear of everybody. Now it's the other way around sometimes. So it's going to be fascinating to see see if these upgrades on that McLaren especially work, because Mercedes have also brought upgrades. It's the same upgrades they brought to Spa, but they eventually didn't use. So that's why there's obviously, a lot of optimism at Mercedes that their new floor is going to work out. This then was kind of like the overall data put into a spreadsheet. So in terms of medium run pace, Max was at, as we saw, a 1:16.1, Checo at a 1:16.4, Oscar and Lando in the 1:15s, Hamilton at a 1:16 flat. Russell was actually on the softs then, right? So for the medium runners, we saw that Max and Hamilton were kind of on the same pace. Leclerc was a bit further back with Checo, and then it was the two McLarens that looked to be the fastest in the long run pace. On the soft data, we saw something a little bit different, with actually Russell, Norris and Max all on pretty similar pace. So Norris's run was pretty short though, Max's was a bit longer, and he did manage a 15.1 on his final lap, which was pretty impressive given what you'd expect from the degradation. Russell wasn't able to do that. So, some interesting takeaways there. Tough to say what that means for race trim, what that means when we get to Sunday, but of course on the Saturday, the information we have is as we have so far. Of course, lots of reaction to the session as well. Toto Wolff says that Mercedes actually did try and hold talks with Verstappen's management over the summer break, and said, we thought all through the year there was a window of opportunity to make this happen. It was not a 0% chance. I got on with Jos, his father, for all my life. That's why I thought the door was never completely closed. I did not want to give up, but then we came together to the conclusion over the summer that we shouldn't be waiting for something to happen before committing for 2025. Let's just do our job. Max at Red Bull, and here at Mercedes taking our own driver decisions. So, there's no more clear indication of the fact that Kimi Antonelli will be their driver for next season. Hamilton's reaction here to practice, saying that he felt even just okay today, which is, that's, I think, the exciting part in some way for Mercedes, that Hamilton was P3 today, a 10th of Russell, who was leading the lines, and Hamilton's like, yeah, felt okay, but, we can do better, right? Like, he felt like he could get more out of himself, and he felt like probably they could get more out of the car, and he says it wasn't the best start to the weekends, but there's a massive difference compared to last year, which they were not so good around here. So the car is definitely feeling more alive, and we're up there at the front. We understand the car so much better now to start off on the right foot from the get-go, and it just makes small tweaks from there is very, very helpful. Makes our job a lot more enjoyable. So Hamilton still seems to believe there's potentially more to come from the car tomorrow and throughout the rest of the weekend. And already Mercedes are P1, P3, with the McLarens right there, and then Verstappen in the mix as well, as you'd usually expect. So it's exactly in some ways the Friday that I was hoping for and expected, with 5 cars fighting it up at the top, the 2 Mercedes, the 2 McLarens and Max Verstappen. That's pretty much how it's been lately, and that seems to be how we might expect it to continue. So very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comments below. Hamilton went on to say that he didn't really get the most out of the soft tyre. He felt like there was more to get from the setup, but otherwise it's pretty good. Difficult to say on the long runs. Don't know if I was particularly quick. He reckons that the single lap setup was hindering the long run to some degree, and reckons they were in the mix. So yeah, feeling being there's potentially more to come from the W15 this weekend, and if there is, well, is there more to come from the McLaren as well, and is there more to come from the Red Bull and Max Verstappen? Max is not so sure that there is significantly more to come. As he says, in FP1 we obviously couldn't drive much, in FP2 we could see a bit where we stand. We're just too slow in both the short and the long run, so there is some serious work to do. I don't have the answers at the moment for how we can improve in order to win the race on Sunday. We are going to look at it because we are just too slow. It's as simple as that. This is where we were in the past races as well, so it's no surprise. We're just trying to find a bit more speed for Sunday. So yeah, Max pretty much admitting that he doesn't really feel like the race win right now is so much on the cards. He reckons they're just a bit too slow in quali, a bit too slow in race pace. I think probably what Red Bull will have to do this weekend is try and max out on the quali, because qualifying is very important here around Zandvoort. If Max can stick it P1 or P2 and he can get the lead early on, then he can win the race. But if Max is starting P3, or worse, I don't know if it's going to be possible for Max to make moves, because I think even Max said last time out in Spa, had he been leading, had his qualifying lap actually counted and he didn't have the penalty, he feels like he could well have won there from P1. But once he was in dirty air and in traffic, he just didn't have the race pace to actually make the moves. So I think that might be Max's theory again, and Red Bull's theory that they might have to just maximise quali pace, try and qualify as well as possible, and then just hope Max can hold on in some sense. If Max doesn't qualify especially well this weekend, P3 or worse, then I just don't know if he can really move through unless they find something overnight. But very much intrigued to your thoughts on all of this stuff in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.